Hello everyone and welcome to another MinotaurZombie review, this time the long overdue one of Grandia 2. I first played this game about a year ago on the PS2, but I had no way to capture footage, so I couldn't do a review until now. But now we have Grandia 2 Anniversary Edition. So how I'm going to structure this is I'm just going to talk about Grandia 2 as a game and if it's worth playing. And then at the end of the review, I'm going to go over what Anniversary Edition does, if it's worth getting over the other versions, etc. Just a quick overview of Grandia 2 for those of you who aren't aware of it. It was a JRPG originally released for the Dreamcast, developed by Game Arts. Now if you aren't familiar with Game Arts, I can't really blame you because they haven't done a ton of original work themselves, but their most notable things are the Grandia series and the Lunar series. Mostly, though, they just help other studios on their work on games. For example, they helped in the development of Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Now, the game was ported to the PS2 and PC back in the day, however, they're considered to be very poor ports. The hope is that Anniversary Edition takes the best of the Dreamcast while also getting some updated visuals, but I'll get into that at the end. So with that, let's start with one of the arguably most important parts of any JRPG, the story. Now I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. Nothing that gets said here is going to go beyond the first 2 to 3 hours of the game. It should also be noted that this game's story is completely separate from Grandia 1. You don't need to play the first one to understand this one. The stories are kind of like how Final Fantasy does it, where it's completely different worlds, settings, etc., just some similar themes. Now the game begins showing us the main protagonist, Ryudo, in the middle of one of his jobs where he slays a monster to get a trinket back for someone. See, Ryudo is what the game calls a geohound, which is just kind of a fancy name for a mercenary slash sellsword slash monster slayer. It's never really completely described, but it's kind of that general idea. Now unfortunately for Ryudo, unlike many other JRPGs where mercenaries are loved because they're badass, everyone fears him because they think he's a bloodthirsty savage because that must be what all geohounds are like. So Ryudo has lived his life alone in seclusion. Now not long after that, Ryudo gets another job request, this time to be a bodyguard for a singer in the Church of Granus. A lot of the story revolves around the Church of Granus, and we learned early on about an ultimate battle between good and evil, Granus versus Valmar, Granus being the good one, Valmar the evil one, and their battle was so chaotic that it tore huge rifts in the world, now known as the Granus Cliffs. Not surprisingly, in the hundreds of years following, a religion was formed around Granus and is now worshipped like a god. So this bodyguard job introduces Ryudo to the other main character, so to speak, Elena. Elena's the singer for the church, and the job is taking them to a tower on the outskirts of town which has monsters around it, hence why they need Ryudo to be the bodyguard. Once there, they force Ryudo outside while they perform some kind of mysterious ceremony. Obviously, as per JRPG rules, something goes horribly wrong, and Elena finds herself possessed by a piece of Valmar. You guys can probably guess what happens next. Ryudo takes a large sum of money for a job to take Elena all the way to the holy city of Zera, where they can hopefully find a way to exorcise Valmar out of her. Along the way, you'll meet a fairly colorful cast of characters, including Millennia, who is a psychotic devil woman that was released after the seal was broke on Valmar at the tower. The overall goal and story is alright, if a little cliche, and one of my biggest problems with the story is that it becomes very formulaic after a little while into it. You quickly realize that the pattern is travel, get to a town where the town seemingly has some kind of random problem that's horribly affecting the villagers. You're not going to be able to continue on the quest until you solve the problems of the villagers, so the formula becomes travel, get to town, solve problems, rinse and repeat. It's like this for about 3/4 of the game. The last fourth of the game, however, it breaks from this, really starts picking up, and really starts becoming something special. So the overarching story can be a little samey at times throughout the game. What really makes it special to me, though, is the fantastic writing and personality of the characters. To me, they are the story, basically. The funny thing is if you just look at these characters at face value, they can easily fall into some of the standard JRPG archetypes. Ryudo's the sellsword, who's only in it for the money and doesn't care about anything. Elena's the goody two-shoes that can't bear to see anyone stranded and will go out of her way to help anyone. Millennia's the psychotic devil woman who desperately makes advances towards Ryudo at all times. And yet, they evolve so far past these archetypes just due to the character interactions and dialogue. For example, Ryudo is very snarky and cynical, and he has a comeback for almost anything anyone says as some kind of jokey remark. Well, later on in the game, Elena mentions that she cannot possibly continue this quest until the people of this village are saved. Ryudo's response? We have 1 day to do this, and after that, I don't care how many kittens are stuck in trees, we're getting out of here. Even Elena, who falls heavily into the archetype of naive country girl who has a strong sense of justice and compassion, ends up not becoming completely annoying like a lot of those characters do, just to the character interactions with Ryudo and the dialogue exchange between the two of them. I can safely say that pretty much every character in the cast is at least somewhat likable. Even the kid character, who is like notorious in JRPGs for being just annoying in general, they even made the kid character pretty likable. They also brought over one of my favorite things about Grandia 1, and that's making NPC dialogue throughout town actually meaningful. Rather than just being information dispensers, it's more of a conversation between party members. They'll usually say something, and then Ryudo will have some kind of witty comeback or at least a response to it, rather than just, "Oh, did you know that the town gates are closed today? Oh, yep, they're down." The other thing that I love that they continued was the dinner scenes. They're more optional in this one, but I completely invite everyone who plays this game to go check them out. Anytime you get to an inn and you see the option to spend the night, do it, and you get a ton of flavored dialogue from the characters talking about the current situation, or even just their lives in general, providing more backstory to it. It's got an interesting mechanic where you choose which characters to talk to and which characters are controlling the conversation. Just a really cool mechanic that I love, and it's one of the nice touches that Grandia is known for. There is actually some voice dialogue in this game, and it can be overacted and a little cheesy at times.
Please, a monster has stolen my precious medal. It was a memento of my mother. Will you help me get it back, please? I can pay you whatever you ask.
Sorry, I cannot spare the time. I'm already in the middle of one job.
Ryudo, I think we should try.
Aren't we in a hurry to get you to the cathedral? Sorry, kid, but you better give up on your medal.
Do I have to? Oh, I guess so.
But as far as the time period of when this game was made, it's actually a pretty good English dub for the most part. The overacting, and I'd rather have the characters be overacted and cheesy as opposed to deadpan, emotionless characters. So, onto the meat and potatoes of this game, the battle system. Now, you don't even need me to explain much of it to you if you've played Child of Light, played Grandia 1, or watched my Grandia 1 review. The only difference here between Grandia 1 and Grandia 2 is that now it's in 3D! Other than that, the core battle system is almost identical to Grandia 1. And you know what? That's not a bad thing at all, because it's a hell of a good battle system. Upon first looking at this footage, some of you might be thinking that this is actually kind of an action RPG, something similar to like Star Ocean. I assure you, it is completely turn-based. I'm just going to give a very brief overview over the battle system and how it works if you haven't watched my Grandia 1 review or played either of those games. The easiest way for me to describe it is it's kind of a modified ATB system from the Final Fantasy games. There's a bar at the bottom that everyone's moving along, and about 3/4 of the way through the bar, there's a command section. From there, you input what you want your character to do. Now during that last fourth of the bar is where the character's preparing the attack. Certain attacks are going to take longer than others, like huge magic spells take a long time. Now if you're hit with certain attacks during that phase, you'll actually have your attack cancelled and sent flying back way earlier on the ATB bar. This can be done to either you or the enemies, so it makes for like a strategic moment of planning out and interrupting characters before they get a chance to attack you. Now, there's no timing necessarily in it, because everything is on a fixed slider, so it's not like you can delay your attack to be like, oh, I'll just cancel them every time. But there's still strategy involved of commanding all your characters and noticing that this enemy's going to use a big super attack against me. I better cancel that. As far as different attacks, just like Grandia 1, you have Combo, which is a multi-hitting attack that kind of does the most damage over time. You have Critical, which takes a little bit of time to prepare. but it's what cancels an enemy's attack. It's just a single, slightly harder hitting attack. Then you have special moves, which are unique to each character, and they consume SP, which is regained by just attacking enemies. And then you have magic attacks, which use a standard MP gauge, and any character can use magic. Where this differs from Grandia 1, and this is my favorite part, because other than this, the battle system is essentially the same, other than a lot of things working better now that it's in 3D. Characters don't get hung up on each other quite as much. But my favorite thing is that the grind is gone. Now you power up your special moves not by constantly using them over and over again like Grandia 1, or using a certain weapon over and over again. Now it's essentially a currency at the end of every battle. You get special coins and magic coins, and from there you can choose who to power up, what magic to power up. It's fantastic and such an improvement over the first game, and really solves one of my only gripes with the entire battle system. Very few times throughout this game did I get annoyed with enemy encounters. The only gripes I have is that spell animations can take a little bit too long, a trait characterized by many games of this era. The other gripe being that the game is a little bit too easy. Oftentimes, area of effect magic spells are your best method for taking out trash mobs. This kind of goes back to my previous problem with the animations taking a little bit too long. In the end though, these are just really general nitpicks in a game that has a battle system that rewards smart play, isn't overly complex, and is just plain fun. One thing that really helps keep you interested in the battles, and it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, the game is so dynamic and all the characters are moving around. It reminds me of Chrono Trigger. There's always something going on. It's never just static people staring at the enemy like an old Final Fantasy game. Another fun thing about the battle system is that there's a fair degree of customizability with each character. How you actually use magic is you equip a mana egg, and you'll receive a few of them throughout the game, and they're actually what provide the magic, and you can choose which magic spells to upgrade, which ones you can ignore, and it's the same thing for skill books. Each skill book provides things like stat bonuses, speed ups, reduced item time usage, and you can equip these to characters. If there's one thing I can promise you about this game, even if you don't like the characters somehow, and you don't like the story, you're gonna enjoy the battle system because it's one of the finest I've seen in an RPG. Now the soundtrack for this game, I freaking love this soundtrack. It has probably my second favorite battle music of all time for regular enemies. It is always on key with what is going on in the game. It can be a little cheesy at times with the kind of music it is, but on the whole, I love this soundtrack. The town themes are great, the traveling music is awesome, and like always in my reviews, I'm going to be playing my favorite ones from throughout the game, throughout the review. So, highly recommend you guys check out this soundtrack if nothing else. It is fantastic. Now, how the game looks, the graphics aren't awful necessarily, but they're not going to be winning any awards. I don't think these graphics are probably even that spectacular for the time. I mean, the character models don't even have mouths. It's very Final Fantasy VII-esque in a lot of ways. At the same time, it's never a problem throughout the game. There'll never be a time where you can't make out what's going on because the graphics are too shoddy. And once again, I gotta give major props to whoever did the character portraits in this game, because they add so much character and personality to all of the playable cast, with various facial emotions matching whatever they're saying at any time. It's very well done. Probably the worst part of the graphics is how the magic is done and the spell effects and that sort of thing. A lot of times it's just an FMV laid over the actual screen itself, and it just looks a little weird, and they're not the highest quality FMVs I've ever seen in my life. But once again, that's a pretty small nitpick. It never really detracts from the overall experience. But in overall thoughts, is this a game where you should play? Abso-freaking-lutely. If you like JRPGs, you're gonna love this game. Even if you don't like JRPGs, the battle system is interesting enough to where I think even people who aren't fans of turn-based games can get into this one because it's so dynamic. It follows a great cast of characters. The story, for the most part, is a little average. It's never bad. The soundtrack's amazing. The graphics are, they're alright. Looking back at my save file on the PS2, the playtime ran about 33 hours, which It's not that short of a game, not too long either. Like I said, your options for getting this game is the original Dreamcast version, the PS2 port, or the original PC port. Now I will say the original PC port, there's no reason to ever get that anymore now that Anniversary Editions come out. And now that we're at the end, let's talk about Anniversary Edition. The game has been out about a week now as I've recorded this, and it absolutely breaks my heart to say this, but the port is not very good. I've only played about the first 4 hours so far, so I can't comment on the entire port. However, I've seen enough bug threads on the Steam forums and other forums to know that this game is kind of a buggy nightmare. My first problem with it upon booting up is the audio issues. The audio doesn't loop correctly, and the audio mixing is just awful. Some sound effects are ear-bleedingly bad if you have headphones on. Every sound effect is like twice as loud as it was on every other version. It's incredibly distracting, and you can barely hear the music or the spoken dialogue at times over it. And when I say audio looping problems, I mean in general audio looping problems. In the very first intro cutscene, you'll notice right away there's like crickets chirping in the background, and it is looped so poorly. It's like a 1.5 second loop, and it doesn't end, it just starts again. And it's like this for so many sound effects. It's just really awful. The music doesn't loop correctly. All the music will usually fade out after so long and then just start again. It's just not a lot of effort was put into the audio of this game, which is really a shame because it is so good. Other bugs that other people have encountered, but I have personally not. There seems to be a lot of claims of memory leaks, the game crashing after a while. There is an NPC in one of the cities where if you talk to her, she instantly crashes the game for some reason. There's graphical missteps everywhere. Some animations don't play at all, making things look really weird. This is seen early on when the priest is supposed to shoot a fireball at Millennia. However, he just puts his hand up and nothing comes out, and Millennia deflects nothing. And a lot of times the camera will rotate, and then you'll like be seeing underneath the scenery at certain scenes, and it just really not poorly done, clearly was not play tested right. Another glaring flaw is that there's this really weird frame rate stutter, and it's most noticeable when the camera starts rotating and panning around during certain scenes. Not to mention some incredibly bad screen tearing. The VSync option in-game doesn't really solve any of this. If you force half refresh rate VSync in your graphics card options, you can get rid of the stutter, but the screen tearing is just as bad as ever. So you have to pretty much force VSync in the graphics card options just to make the screen tearing not there, but you still have the weird stutter. It's just really not good. So out of everything that's wrong with this port, and the list is somewhat extensive, what new things can you look forward to in it? Well, you can go all the way up to 1080p, and it looks quite nice actually. Nothing really looks like it was updated. The models all look the same, but it's upscaled very nicely, and everything does look good on a 1080p monitor. Nothing looks super stretched or anything. Some of the icons are really small now, and you can clearly see that some of the textures and assets, they just decided to leave at their original resolution, so things can look a little small if you're used to the other versions, but you won't even notice it otherwise. The other thing? A hard difficulty mode. Kind of solves one of the issues I originally had with the game. And I'm going to debunk some of the things that have been spread around the internet because the developers actually come out and discussed this. The hard mode does not just simply add 20% extra HP to all the monsters, thank God. The developers come out and said that all the monsters are willing to use special attacks more frequently, they act a bit faster in battle, and yes, the HP is increased, but they also changed a few other attributes around too. So overall, I was playing on the hard mode. It seems alright. I haven't noticed a huge difficulty spike, but I've heard other people say it manifests itself way later in the game, and that's when things get a little bit more difficult. Now, despite all the problems I listed earlier, I'm still really hopeful for this game. It was based on the Dreamcast code, which was obviously the best version. Funnily enough, the developer actually says you can port your Dreamcast saves directly into this game, and you can. It's kind of funny. But if these issues get fixed, and I am I'm hopeful that they will be, because the developer has been very open in discussing things on the forums. They've already released 2 patches to fix an issue with receiving experience at the end of battle, as well as a game-ending bug early on that was present in other versions of the game. I'm hoping that they can fix these issues, but until then, the Dreamcast version is still going to be your best bet for this game. I'm going to be updating this with annotations as patches come out for this game, and hopefully it's better. As far as your choice between Anniversary Edition and the PS2 version, it's a toss-up. The PS2 version has some horrendous frame rate drops. I'm talking single-digit stuff in a lot of areas of the game. And it's funny, I went back and played it, and it actually did make me think better of Anniversary Edition, because it is so much more smooth. But then again, the PS2 version doesn't have these audio issues. The footsteps aren't so loud you'll be tearing your headphones off, and you can actually listen to the music. As far as game crashes, I'd say they're kind of equal. I think the game crashed on me 3 or 4 times throughout my journey through the PS2 version, and my first 4 hours I haven't crashed at all in the Anniversary Edition. I actually haven't had a lot of the issues a lot of other people have been having. That's not to say they don't exist, though. So, overall, this game is awesome. If you need to play it right now, get the Dreamcast version. If not, hopefully the Anniversary Edition gets fixed, because I don't wish the PS2 version on anyone if it's the other best way to play the game. You can get it right now for $15. It's on sale on Steam and GOG until Monday. After that, it's going to go back to $20. I'm really hoping that this game gets fixed, and I hope you guys check it out, because it's absolutely fantastic. But till next time, thank you guys so much for watching this review. Later, everyone.